desert and I found you. You set a table for me in the presence of my enemy, to share with my enemy. No longer my enemy. No longer my enemy. There's a river running through our deepest sorrow. There's a river running through our deepest pain. There's a river running through every dream that never came true, made us a king. But there's a river running through. We're a canyon, we're a canyon. There's a river running through. We're a canyon, we're a canyon. There's a river running through. We're a canyon, we're a canyon. But there's a river running through. We're a canyon, we're a canyon. We're a canyon. But there's a river running. There's a river running. There's a river running through.
Got a lot in my past, got a lot on my mind. There's a lot of things I want back, there's a lot of me I don't like. But I come just as I am to you, and I know just what you're gonna do. When I need grace, you give it wholehearted, give it wholehearted. I was amazed, but you never departed, never departed. Faithful when I'm at my worst. No, I don't get what I do.
Well, good morning. Happy New Year. Welcome to church. We're so glad you're with us today. Please come and join with us as we sing together this morning. Let's sing People Come Together. People come together, strangers, neighbors, our blood is one. Children, generation of every nation are free. So don't let your heart beat everything with breath. Repeat the sound of his children. Clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Swing wide. Swing wide, oh you heavens. Let the praise go up as the walls come down. Oh creation, and everything with breath. Repeat the sound of his children. Clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Oh. Swing wide, and know you heavens. Let the praise go up as the walls come down. And all creation, and everything with breath. Repeat the sound of all his children. Clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. You sing swing wide. Oh, swing wide. Oh, you heavens. Let the praise go up as the walls come down. No creation and everything with breath. Repeat the sound of his children. Clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Jesus, our redemption, and our salvation is in his blood. Jesus, light of heaven, bread forever, his kingdom come. Come on, let's applaud the Lord this morning. Well, Happy New Year. What a way to start the year, and we're so glad that you're with us to worship this morning. This is a new song. It's called Wide Open. And look, I don't know, what picture you have of God in your mind, but I've heard it said that what comes to mind when we think about God is the most important thing about us. And this song, it speaks of a God with arms wide open. And wherever you are starting this year, in a great place, in a rough place, whatever that might be, I think the best thing you could do is just think of God, not with folded arms, not with pointed finger, but arms wide open. Arms wide open in forgiveness and encouragement and joy and hope for you and hope for your life. And so please join with us and sing. It'll take a few goes to learn, but it's a beautiful song. No height, no depth, no life or final breath could ever separate us from your love. No failure, no mistake, no loneliness or pain could ever separate us from your love. Could ever separate us from your love. 'Cause on the other side of everything I'm afraid of, you were standing with your arms wide open, wide open. Even in my deepest doubts and wonder, you were standing with your arms wide open, wide open. I'm healed, now I'm healed, made strong, and I found where I belong. make my bed in darkness, if I try my best to hide, and you know the farthest ocean, you give the morning its light. I can't run from your presence, there's no place that far. So I run to you, my Savior, there's safety in your arms. If I make my bed in darkness, if I try my best to hide, you know the farthest ocean, you give the morning its light. 'Cause I can't run from your presence, there's no place that far. So I run to you, my Savior, there's safety in your arms, yeah. Oh, safety in your arms. 'Cause on the other side of everything I'm afraid of, you are standing with your arms wide open, wide open. Even in my deepest doubts and wonders, you are standing with your arms wide open, wide open. On the other side of everything I'm afraid, yeah, you're standing with your arms wide open, wide open. Even in the deepest doubts and wonders, you are standing with your arms wide open, yeah. Oh, wide open.
I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Love you, Lord. I love you, Lord. You have led me through the fire, in the darkest night. You were close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful.
Heavenly Father, we are so incredibly thankful for this moment that we have to begin our year with you and in this amazing community. God, whatever last year looked like, whether it was a great year or a year we'd rather forget, right now in this moment, we commit this day and this year into your hands. We are believing that this is going to be a year that we experience your goodness, your grace, your faithfulness, your love like never before. God, we know you want to change our lives in extraordinary ways, so we are leaning in. We're expectant. God, we're believing today we're going to leave this place far better off because of what you have in store for us. In Jesus' mighty and wonderful name, amen. Amen. Thank you so much for singing. Thanks so much for being a part of our Sunday service here at Suncoast. My name is Stephen, one of the pastors on staff here, and Happy New Year. I know we're 8 days in, but Happy New Year. Welcome to our first service of 2023. You made it. You guys can take your seats, get nice and comfortable. And of course, it is the new year, so we've got to start with some honesty. We're 8 days in. I need a show of hands. Who here still has their Christmas decorations up? All right, everyone look around for those hands that are up. Shame them. No, I'm kidding. It's okay. I didn't even put mine up this year. Who here has already failed their New Year's resolutions? Okay. All of you are just so committed. No, you didn't set any, did you? No, we don't do that anymore. Well, hey, however you started the new year, we're so glad you're here. And if you are new to Suncoast, maybe you're here for the first time or first time in a long time, we are stoked to have you with us, and we hope you have an incredible experience. Our service goes for about 65 minutes, and maybe you've walked in, and church, it's a new experience, right? Maybe you're wondering, what have I walked into? Do these guys have an agenda? Well, the answer is, yeah, we do. Our only agenda here at Suncoast is to be a church that is for the coast, which means that we want the people of the Sunshine Coast to know that we exist, to be happy that we exist, and to be better that we exist. We want the people of the Sunshine Coast to have their lives forever impacted because we do what we do. So thanks so much for being a part of that. And one of the amazing ways that we get to be for the coast is through generosity towards our local community. Week in, week out, we have some of the most generous people you'll ever meet right here in this community. And, we really, really believe that putting God first in our finances is such an incredible decision to make. Last year, we saw God do some truly extraordinary things on the other side of our generosity. And this year, 2023, we're believing that we're going to reach more people. We're going to see more lives impacted. We're going to see more people come to know the love of Jesus than ever before. So thank you so much. It's an exciting thing. Thank you so much to everyone who has made the decision to put God first in your finances in 2023. We know we're only just getting started. And hey, for all of the young adults in the room and watching online, that means if you are between the age of 18 to, let's say, 50, no, I'm kidding, 18 to wherever you want that line to sit, in less than 2 weeks, on the 21st of January, Saturday, we have the 2023 EXO Getaway, which is our annual young adults retreat, where we get away for a day in Noosa to experience some amazing sessions, hear some phenomenal guest speakers, eat some great food, and make some great memories at Noosa Beach. And we want to extend the invitation to you. We 100% believe this is a day that's going to set you up for an incredible year ahead in your faith, in your goals, your professional life, your friendships, all that God has in store for you. It's just $30, one day to set you up for your best year yet. So if you want to know more about that, or if you know a young adult and you're thinking they need to be at something like that, I'm going to be at the Connect Lounge after the service. You can come say hey, or you can message us on any of our social medias. But right now, we are about to kick off our brand new series, Future Proof, with our lead pastor, Jono, beginning things. We hope you enjoy.
Okay, so I'm going to make 10 predictions about what is going to happen in the next 10 years. So write these down. You can quit, and I'm not really going to do that. I've learned from the mistakes of the past. Hey, happy New Year. It's so good to see you. Hopefully you're refreshed and had holidays. Some of you are still on holidays and enjoying it. Maybe you're visiting because you're on holidays. Maybe you wish you were still on holidays. Maybe you're angry that it hasn't been a long enough summer and that there's too many clouds in the sky. I don't know what it is for you, but it's great to have you here. And I'm excited to kick off our new series. My name is Jono, if I haven't met you before, and along with my wife, Chloe, we're the lead pastors here of Suncoast. So let's talk about the future. Over the next few weeks, this is exactly what we want to do. And don't worry, we're not talking about New Year's resolutions at all, so you can just take a breather right there. I'm not going to give you that kind of PTSD. But I do want to ask you a few questions. So let's begin with the future. When you think of the term the future, or tomorrow, for you, what comes to mind? What emotion comes to mind? What memories come to mind about the future, if that makes sense? For example, where were you 10 years ago? If you wind your brain back to where you were 10 years ago, where were you? Where were you geographically? Where were you relationally? Where were you in your personal goals? And did you imagine that you would be here doing what you're doing, with who you're doing it with, in the way that you're doing it 10 years ago? And are you happy with how you've turned out? Well, a few nervous laughs there. So this is important for us to discuss because, like it or not, the future's coming really, really fast. And I remember when I was a young guy, the future was kind of inconsequential to me. Didn't really care too much for it. The future was future Jono's problem, and I didn't envy that guy. But I was living in the present, man, so I didn't worry about the future too much. And until I heard a question was asked, and it rattled me to my core. And I was about 12 at the time, so it wasn't too old. But this question just so gripped my imagination. And it's a simple question, but this is how it went. It said this: a year from today, will I wish that I had started today? And for some reason, this question really bothered me. And at 12 years of age, if you're 12 in the room, if you're around that age, a year might seem like a really, really long time. But what's crazy is the older you get, a year doesn't seem like that long. And you look back, I remember New Year's last year. Actually, my New Year's are getting kind of blurred right now. And so this question at the 12-year-old rattled me. And so I had a goal at 12, and that was I wanted to be a really good guitar player. And I was like, I'm going to do it. And by the time I'm 13, and I'll get to it, and I'll promise I'll learn, I'll get there. Anyway, the weeks turned into months, and the months eventually came around, and I turned 13. And I remember I'll never forget this, my 13th birthday. I saw this quote again for whatever reason, and I was like, oh man, I asked this question 12 months ago, and I was like, I'm going to learn guitar. But now I've done nothing. And now here I am 12 months later. I wish that I had started a year ago. So I picked up the phone, and I called a guitar. I looked in the yellow pages, found it. Remember that? And who would have thought 10 years ago? Anyways, and I called a guitar teacher, and I booked in guitar lessons. And so when my 14th birthday came around, I was like, I've got a year of practicing guitar under my belt. It was great. So this simple question, but it's a question that got me behaving in a certain way. And the reason this question was so important, here's a principle I want to sort of wrestle with at the start of the series. It's how we think about tomorrow has huge implications for how we live today. And it's cliched and kind of surface level that idea might be. Think about it for a moment. Your thoughts about the future and your thoughts about tomorrow, whether they're indifferent, whether they're fearful, whether you're hopeful or expectant, whether you're the kind of person that goes hard for it, whatever it is, our thoughts, how we engage, our relationship with tomorrow, the future, has huge implications for how you and I engage with our responsibilities, our commitment, our relationships, ultimately our lives today. So let's think about the future then. When you think about the future, are you worried? Are you anxious? Are you scared? Do you think the world's getting better? Or do you think the world's getting worse? What emotions come up when you think about the future? And then your future, and the future of your kids, the future of your own life. I specifically recall when I think it was my last semester of university. I was in this particular lecture. There would have been about 50 students in the class. And I forget what subject it was. Got great memory. But I do remember this moment. The lecturer asked the class, I want to see a show of hands. Who thinks that the world as we know it will cease to exist within 100 years? This is in university, final semester. Almost every single hand in the class went up. I was like, what? They were all convinced that the world as we knew it would be over within 100 years. And I was like, wait, peer pressure. Do I put my hand up? I don't know. Like, what do I do? So wherever you stand on that, it's interesting when we think about the future, maybe the stuff that you're passionate about or the stuff that catches your attention, the news that you read or watch or the books you read or the people you listen to. Maybe it shapes your sense of how the world's going, what the future is, but also what your place in the future is and what the next generation will look like. If you're a parent here, considering what am I leaving behind for my children or my grandchildren. So again, how we think about tomorrow in the future has huge implications for how we live today. And the reason I want to talk about this and what we're going to explore in this series is I want us to consider how Jesus teaches us to think about the future. And in that way, we can think the Jesus way about the future so that we can live the Jesus way today. And I think at times, as we'll discover, maybe when we're thinking correctly about the future, and Jesus has so much to say about this, it helps us to engage with the present in such a way that isn't harmful to our future, but actually helps our future. So if you're new to church or exploring faith, maybe your New Year's resolution is I'm going to try at church or maybe re-engage with church first time in a long time. I'm super grateful you're here. I think this is going to be, at least I hope this is going to be a super helpful series for you to engage with, to learn the Jesus way about thinking about the future. And we've got a couple of guest speakers coming up through this series as well you're going to absolutely love. But we're going to wrestle with this idea about the future and what Jesus teaches us about how to think about it. Now, I grew up in church. And my earliest memories of attending church was in the late 80s and early 90s. And if you're around particular church circles, particularly the church circles I was involved in when I was younger, we talked about the future all the time. And there was a particular term, it's a Bible term, we'll get into it today, which I heard more than anything else in my childhood. And it was about the end times. You guys like that topic? So if you're new to church, you've never heard that church before, you just wait, man. If you Google that stuff, be careful. You're going to go down a rabbit hole, right? But I grew up about this. I probably heard about teachings on the end times more than anything else. You're probably wondering, well, what's the end times? Well, in the Bible, there's a lot of references to the end of the age. There's predictions made about it. Jesus taught about it. We're going to look at a bit of what he teaches about it today. But what shaped my view of the future so much was a lot of this Christian teaching around the end times. And most of the stuff freaked me out as a kid. I mean, and kids like to be a little freaked out, so I kind of liked that. I was like, tell me more about how the world's going to end, right? But where a lot of this teaching would come from is tucked away in the very last part of our Bibles, in our New Testament. It's the very last book included there, known as the book of, who knows it? Revelations, right. Now, some of you are like, yes! Someone's finally going to teach in Revelations because no pastors talk about anything from the book of Revelations. If you're not familiar with the Bible, in our New Testament, the very last letter is written by the Apostle John, who's one of Jesus' first followers. And he wrote one of the accounts of Jesus' life, known as the Gospel of John. He wrote 3 other letters included in our New Testament, but he also snuck in this very unique letter called the Revelation of Jesus Christ, or the book of Revelations. And I'm just going to be frank with you, the reason a lot of guys don't teach about this or talk about stuff in the book of Revelations is we just don't know what it means. It's confusing. It's odd. There's a lot of allegory in there. There's some stuff that seems a bit like mystical. There's these predictions about the future, and it was written in the 1st century AD. And if John's testimony is to be believed about what he was shown by God about the future, can you imagine having no context for what you saw? So, for example, if you're writing in the 1st century AD and you saw a computer, like in a vision, how would you write about it? If you saw a car or a plane with people in the windows, like what language would you have to write about that? So John was tasked with a very difficult notion of writing about the things he saw. And so here we are now 2,000 years later going, I know exactly what he meant by that. Like, well, we weren't there and we maybe don't know. So it's difficult to get your head around it. So anyway, I grew up hearing a lot of big predictions about what John meant and what he saw. And I'm not here to cast judgment on who was right, who was wrong, and what is right. But I will say this, when I started reading some of these accounts for myself, there was some parts in the book of Revelations that wasn't allegory and wasn't symbolism. They were pretty straightforward. And it began to rehash the way I saw what maybe God was trying to show us about the future. And right at the back of the very last book of our Bibles, in the last 2 pages, where the story comes to a close about what the future looks like according to John's revelation, he hears from God these words, and this is what I read as a young man. It says this. It says, he, meaning God, will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. How does that sound? So I remember reading this going, no one's preached on that. Like, I've heard about how everything's going to end, and I've heard that from Christians, and I've heard that from people who aren't faith-based. I've heard it from other religions. Everyone's got their narrative about where this whole human story is going. But then I read this, and I'm like, hang on. This isn't like a message of despair. This is hopeful. And here's the whole point. When Jesus walks amongst the earth 2,000 years ago, the world was despairing about a lot of things. And you can use your imagination to imagine what it would be like living under Roman oppression in the year, 1 AD. And the diseases that were prevalent, the wars that were prevalent, the disasters that took place, the injustice that abounded. Like, there was a lot to be upset about. And so Jesus came along and gave us a picture of what he has promised to give us, a new kingdom, a new world where the old things will eventually pass away and there'll be something new. Look at this, where every tear will be wiped away. Can you imagine no more death? No more crying or mourning or pain. So this incredible promise, and I realized something, that for Jesus, the message of the end, the message of the future, isn't one primarily of doom, but of hope. So let me just put it to you this way. If you're not a member of Suncoast Church, this doesn't have to apply to you at all, but if you're a member of Suncoast Church, as your pastor, I just want to say this. I tread cautiously when I hear messages predominantly of doom about the future. Because I'm like, I don't know if that's the kingdom that Jesus promised to give us. It seemed to be one where he promised he would wipe away every tear from our eyes, that Jesus came to redeem the world. And one day, that all the things that we are crying out for, that when you experience injustice, when you've experienced that before, right? When you see things in the world that just seem wrong and go, where, God, are you in this? He has promised that one day he will make all things right. This is a message. This is a message of hope. And so to a world filled with despair and fear about the future, Jesus gave people a hope to hold on to. That God is a God you can trust. That, as we sung before, that he is faithful. And while we look around the world and there could be a lot of things to despair about and be worried about and be cautious about, you have a heavenly Father that Jesus draws our attention toward, that says you can trust him, and one day he is going to make everything right. Now, it's these tensions and these questions, and maybe questions you've got, and if you're new to church and you're like, man, I heard suspicions about Christians and how they talk about things like that, and I'm just confirming all your suspicions now. Again, hang with me for just a few weeks, because you're going to find this message isn't one of despair. This is one of incredible hope. And so Jesus taught a lot about this stuff, surprisingly enough. And his followers, as you can imagine, they were curious about this. So they prodded Jesus, like, tell us more about this. And everyone's kind of been curious. Wouldn't you love it if someone came along and said, I know by the year 2000, all the computers are going to shut down, and all the water systems and sewage systems, and everything's going to shut down. Like, our ears prick up, right, when we hear about predictive doom or the ends of things. Some of you are like, what's he talking about there? You're too young. You went around when the whole world shut down at the millennium. Man, they were terrifying times. Anyone filled up their bath with water back then? I can't be responsible. I was only 14, so I can't be held responsible for back then. But anyway, so Jesus' followers came and asked him this. And Matthew is one of Jesus' followers. He recorded how some of the conversations went. And here's what he writes. This is a few days out before Jesus, funnily enough, was crucified. It says, as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, which is a couple of hours walk outside of the city of Jerusalem, you can still visit this place today. His disciples, his followers, came to him privately and said, tell us, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? So when is the end? What will it look like? What will the signs be? And when's your second coming? And so the reason these are kind of gone hand in hand, it's worth knowing that the teachings of Jesus' second coming in the end times is because, or the end of the age, is Jesus predicted that he would come again. Now, that was on top of a lot of other predictions. He predicted his own death. He predicted his own resurrection. Now, those two things are a big deal. But for Jesus' followers who saw him teach, saw him crucified, and then saw him walking around again, they were like, man, he's pulled off every single prediction he's made about himself, and they're extraordinary. So they had no reason to doubt then his promise that he would again return and set everything right. The old order of things would pass away, and he'd bring his new kingdom. So for 2,000 years, Jesus' followers who have believed in only his death and resurrection have clung on to this hope that Jesus again would return. And so this is the question that Jesus' disciples are asking him. Now, this is a question, I think, again, that has been popping the curiosity of humans forever. Now, when you hear these ideas about the signs of the end of the age or the end time, maybe this is the kind of image that pops up in your mind, someone who looks like this. Okay, you guys seen those guys? Maybe you are that guy. Right, we've all experienced them, and every time something through history that's gone wrong, people have pulled out, the sign, swung the bell, and said, the end is nigh, repent, the whole world's going to be burnt up. And so this is a theme or a topic that hasn't come out of nowhere. It's been kind of like this curiosity, and a lot of this has actually come from what Jesus pointed to and Jesus talked about. And so I can understand your apprehension in talking about a topic like this, going, Jono's this guy right now, okay? I just want you to hold your breath. I promise you I'm not trying to be this guy. I don't know what kind of guy I'm trying to be, but certainly not trying to be this guy. But here's what's remarkable. It's historically, we will see that at least for the recorded past 2,000 years, and those who have encountered the teachings of Scripture and have looked at some of the teachings around the end of days and the second coming of Jesus, people have been convinced in every nation and every time all across humanity that their time was the end time. And to look at the events that they were experiencing, I'm just giving you history here, I'm not giving you my opinion about it, I'm just explaining how it goes. People have looked at the events of their era and have looked at some of the stuff that Jesus predicted and Jesus talked about and that was in the book of Revelation. They're like, it's talking about our time. They've looked at the plagues they experienced, they looked at the natural disasters they experienced, they looked at the wars that they were experiencing, the injustice they were experiencing, the evil that was happening in their times. And I'm like, surely all these signs, and this is what Jesus' disciples are asking, what are the signs? All these signs are pointing towards the end of the age. Surely Jesus' return is imminent. And again, in the last century, there's a whole lot of events that took place that people this is surely this is it. Like when the First World War happened, people were convinced that the Antichrist had come, that Jesus' return was imminent. When the Second World War happened, people were convinced again. So many of the events that took place in the last century, people were convinced. Because again, this has been a common trajectory of our tendencies, people, is to superimpose Jesus' teaching into our times. Now, whilst again, we'll see Jesus treads cautiously about trying to make big predictions about the future, and you know why he did that, because you and I can't control the future. What his teaching did do was even better. Jesus' teachings about the end times has always given Christians a framework in which to understand their own times. Here's what I want to teach about. Jesus' teachings on the end times has always given Christians who have applied this healthily a healthy framework in which to understand their own times. Because again, as I said at the start, how we think about the future, how we think about things that are uncertain and things we have no control over have huge implications for how we engage with our lives, engage with the times we live in, engage with people around us. So, to Jesus' teachings, his disciples are asking him to tell us about what's going to happen, what's the signs, and when are you going to return? And so Jesus teaches them a principle. A few verses down, here's what he says. He goes, I want you to keep watch, because you do not know what day the Lord will come. And that might sound like a cop-out, right? Thanks, Jesus. You're saying, you're not telling us, we don't know, you don't know, he doesn't know. But that's what he teaches. Next verse, he says this. But understand, and he gives a picture. If the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, again, he's given a picture illustration, because he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. Now, we just had Christmas time. I'm not sure what movies you watch at Christmas time, but Chloe and I, we went old school. We decided to go through the Home Alone films. Anyone big fans of Home Alone 1, Home Alone 2? Okay, I'm with friends. Good. If I do this at the night service tonight, they're all going to look at me going, what's Home Alone? They just will. And so we watched that. And what's funny, in the first one, if you recall, Kevin McAllister, the kid stuck at home, he overheard the plans of these two thieves who intended to rob his home whilst he was home alone. And he heard them say their plan, that they planned on coming back. Who remembers what time they're planning on coming back to rob their house? 9 o'clock. You guys saw it too. So what did he do? He prepared booby traps all through his house to be ready at 9 o'clock because he knew what time the thieves were coming. So Jesus was just predicting Home Alone. Said, but that's a picture. He's saying, if you'd known what time the thief was coming, you would keep watch, right? And you would not have let your house be broken into. And it goes on. Next verse, he says, so you must be ready, because the Son of Man, and that's a term Jesus would often refer to himself as, the Son of Man, that he will come, or I will return at a time, at an hour, when you don't expect it. Now, this is the first bit of tension. You're like, So we're to be expectant you're returning, like believe you're returning, but you're going to come when we're not expecting it. So which one is it? Like, do we expect that you're going to return, but then you're going to return when we're not expecting you're going to return? Like, he's like, exactly. But here's his application. He says, so you've got to be ready. Like, be ready for when? You don't know. Just, you've got to be ready. What does he mean by this? Now, can you believe it was almost 3 years ago when the whole world got shut down? 3 years. Wild. And do you recall when we were all worried that this was the end of all things and society was breaking down as we knew it and we were all uncertain about the future, and so we all had to be prepared and get ready for the unknown? This is what being ready for the unknown future looked like to us all in Australia. Am I right or am I wrong? I just think it's... Do you remember that moment? Shopping and going, this is ridiculous. But apparently for Aussies, our applications of being ready for the uncertain future means buy a lot of dunny roll, okay? So, toilet roll. Anyways, so what did Jesus mean about be ready? You've got to be ready. You don't know what the future holds, but you've got to be ready. Luckily for us, Jesus teaches through a parable of what he means by be ready. And here's the framework I want to teach us today to kick off our series about how Jesus teaches us, gives us a framework to understanding our own times. This is what Jesus means by to be ready. He says this in the next verse. Who then is the faithful and wise servant, remember these terms, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time. Next verse. It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Okay, so Jesus paints this picture of a household where the master goes away and leaves, he uses the term servants in charge. And he goes, who's the faithful and wise servant who gives the other servants food at their proper time? He goes, it's going to be good for that person if they're doing that when the master returns. So let's break down, and then we'll look at the second half of this teaching. Jesus uses the term to describe us. Again, this is in the context of when they're like, Jesus, explain to us about the future. What's going to happen? He calls us servants, that we're servants. Now, what's a servant? I know it's not a term we use all the time here, but it's someone who is responsible for looking after someone else's property or someone else's affairs. That's been charged with that. And we have a more common term for that, not servant, but stewards. And so Jesus looks at us and he says, well, you are stewards. What are we stewards of? Think of this. When he looks at our life, and this is in context of the question, remember that was being asked about the future and what's the future, and we're uncertain about the future. Within that context, he says, listen, your life, this is what you need to remember first and foremost, is you are stewards of your life. You're not owners. And he encourages us to not look at our lives as though we are independent, by ourselves, accountable to no one, can do our own thing, get away with whatever we want, and there's no one looking over our shoulder. He says it's not how it works. You are a steward. You're a steward of your life. You're a steward of your time. You're a steward of your resources. You're a steward of your gifts. You're a steward of your responsibilities. And Jesus gives this implication that we will be held to account of what we do with what we've been given. How's that for a thought? So rather than Jesus pointing our attention to everything that's happening out there and all the stuff we can't control, he straight away brings our attention to our lives. He says, you're a steward. You're a steward. And he says, so here's what I want to find. Faithful and wise servants, and he says, this is what they're doing. They are giving the other servants food at their proper time. What are they doing? They're nourishing those around them. So what does it mean for us to be stewards? Is that we would leverage all of our resources to be a blessing to others. Now, if this sounds familiar, it should, because this is like right at the heart of Jesus' teaching all through the Gospels, that we are called to be a blessing to the world, that we are to love our community, to love our neighbors, love our enemies, in the same way we've been loved by God. This is familiar territory, which makes sense, because when Jesus was asked about the end of all things, he brings our attention back to familiar territory. You are stewards, you are servants in a house, and your responsibility is to be a blessing to others, to leverage what you've got, to nourish the lives of other people. And this is what Jesus says. When asking questions about uncertainty of the future, this is how I want you to live. Do you know what I absolutely loved, what I loved being a part of? Again, 3 years ago when kind of our way our society was organized went belly up and we were all worried and we were all uncertain and these are unwritten, there was no precedent for what we were going through. Do you know what I want to say? And if you're part of Suncoast, I was so proud of you. If you're watching along from Canberra, I was proud of you at Impact Church. Because when everything was shutting down, instantly, you guys clicked into mission gear. And we're like, how can we serve? How can we help? How can we keep being about the mission we're called to? And we have a saying in our leadership team around here that we marry the mission, we're committed lifelong to the mission that we've been given, but we date the model, right? So we kind of suss out the model depending on the age or era, what we're going through. We can change the model anytime we want, but we're committed to the mission. And you guys did that. As soon as everything started shutting down, we're like, we have to stay on mission. How do we keep being a blessing to our community? And if you're new to Suncoast Church, you need to know something about how we're wired. We are a mission-driven church and a vision-led church. And our mission is that we would be a church that loves like Jesus. And if we do that, which is the second part of our mission, that we would be a church that the unchurched love. I mean, people are unchurched, and you might be one of those unchurched people watching or in the room right now, is that you might not believe everything Christians believe, and particularly the stuff I'm teaching about today. You might be going, man, he is that end is nigh guy. I didn't believe this stuff. But you're probably grateful that we're here. At least that's our mission, that you'd look at the difference we make in our city, that our city is better off. And you guys did that perfectly. All through those initial phases of COVID, when everyone was freaking out, you guys went in. And I remember one of the stories that just blessed my heart so much. One of the ministries we run during the week is Daily Bread, which is our soup kitchen. And obviously, no restaurants were running, no shops were open. But our team was like, there are still people who are vulnerable. There are still people who are hungry. There are still people who are lonely and need connection and need food. We have to find a way to adjust the model so we can keep the mission going. And I remember seeing pictures. I wasn't able to go there myself because I had to get approval and all those things. But I remember seeing the pictures of people who were still feeding the homeless in our city, trying to keep this mission going even though the times were uncertain. And that's what I want to say. I am proud of you for being a mission-led church, being a church that doesn't just get led by the highlights and by the headlines, but you're a church that is led by your heart to be Jesus followers. And I think that is absolutely awesome. And you're exactly, I think, the kind of people that Jesus is referring to here. He said, who is the faithful and wise servants? That's the term he used. Faithful and wise. So when he returns one day and he finds us around, he's like, who's the faithful and wise servants that are finding ways to leverage what they've got to be a blessing to the world? I find it interesting that he uses these two adjectives. Sounds good. Okay, thank you. I was waiting for any of the teachers in the room to help me out. Faithful and wise. And this framework here, I think it's right. It's certainly one that's helped me to look at all the uncertainty of the future around us. This is how I kind of understand what I think Jesus was referring to here. The idea of being a faithful servant is this. Let's throw it up. That we would live like Jesus could return at any time. So it's like, okay, if Jesus promised that one day he'll return, and we don't know when that is, but we've got to be ready. Faithful means, am I stewarding what I've got in such a way that at any moment the master could return? He's like, are you being faithful with what I gave you? But then he also says, be a wise servant. What's wise? That we would steward our resources like Jesus won't return for generations. And these two things, Jesus followers for 2,000 years have been holding in tension together. To live ready, Jesus said, be ready in such a way that I'm faithful with what he's given me. That he could return at any moment. He won't find me asleep at the wheel. I'm faithful. I'm living as a follower of Jesus, but I'm also wise. Precedent says, probably not. Jesus said, I can't expect it in my era, so I'm going to be wise with what I've got and recognize he might not return for generations. Now, if you're unchurched here, this might be like extremely terrifying to you or extremely wonderful. Terrifying because it's like, you guys actually believe this? And again, this is hard to wrap our head around because it's all teaching about things that we have no control over, the future. But it's also a wonderful story. It's a wonderful promise because the promise is with his return, he will wipe away, as we read earlier, every tear from our eye. The old order of things will pass away. And Jesus will rule as king forever. And this is why Jesus invites everyone to follow him. And if you're someone who's fearful of the future, if you're someone who is nervous about the uncertainty of everything, the biggest hope I can encourage you towards is put your trust in Jesus. Commit your life to following him and connect your hopes in life to an eternal hope that will never let you down. Now, Jesus goes on and kind of gives the other side of this, and here's what he says. Suppose, though, that the servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. That sound familiar, right? The delay. Jesus was like preparing people that I'm not coming back straight away. There's going to be a long time. Suppose, and they say to themselves, master's away a long time, he's delayed. And then he does this. He begins to beat his fellow servants. So rather than giving the fellow servants food at the proper time, he beats his fellow servants and he goes in to eat and drink with drunkards. In the next verse, it says, the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him and at an hour that he is not aware of. So he highlights these two things that happen when we're like, it's never happening. There is no account. There is no promise of one day when. He said, if you live like that, Jesus warns us two things that will probably be present in your life. It's how you treat others. He talked about the whole beating of the other servant, literally assaulting them, and how you treat yourself, abusing your own body, abusing your own potential. And he warns about this idea that don't fall for the trap of thinking that I'm delayed or the master is delayed. It's therefore you can do what you want. You can abuse people. You can abuse yourself. There's no accountability. Here's the point. Don't let Jesus' delay cause our standards to decay. Is that memorable? Because it rhymes? Exactly, it rhymes, so it's true. But doesn't this happen to us when we're like, they're delayed, they're never coming home. I'll leave the house how I want to be. And then all of a sudden, Chloe rocks up home. We would at least expect it. Sorry, So Jesus said, don't be that guy. And here's the thing, isn't it true though, when hope is delayed, and maybe you've experienced, I've certainly experienced this, there can be a temptation to take out our disappointment in unhealthy ways. Take out our disappointment in unhealthy ways. Sometimes we can take it out on others. We can let our frustration and our anger come out on others, and we can be abusive in our language. We've seen people who are in hopeless situations abuse people physically. And we see this happen all the time when hope is delayed. It can cause people to not only abuse others, but also abuse their own life. And you maybe give yourself to substance abuse that's just destroying your potential, destroying your body. And here I think the principle that Jesus is trying to get across, it's worth us remembering, especially when there's a delay, is that no body is just a body. Everybody is a somebody. And it's easy for us when there's a delay or we look at how bad things might be and we're not sure about the world, it's easy for us to draw a conclusion that, well, I'm going to take it out on someone else. But Jesus said, no, don't do that. Don't be that wicked and lazy servant that beats others, because nobody is just a body for you to do what you wish with them, to abuse them because you're despairing or you're hopeless. What Jesus shows us is that everybody is somebody. Because it's for that somebody sitting next to you, and it's for the somebody you looking at the mirror every day, that Jesus gave his life for. And everybody is somebody that God sees with immense value and worth of the utmost to him, that he gave his life to redeem your life. So Jesus would say, when you think about all the things you're uncertain about, don't fall for the trap of just taking out the delay and your frustration on other people, because they're valuable. And don't take it out on yourself by engaging in behaviors that just destroy your potential and destroy your future, because your life, again, is valuable. It matters to God. And often when we allow our standards to decay eventually, and this precedent has shown this over and over again, it can often lead to us despairing. And do you despair? When you look at the future, we're doing this series called Future Proof, do you look at the future and like, I can't think about the future too much because I don't like what I think is going to happen. I look at the stats of our society, and you don't even have to talk about global events. You can maybe just look at your own family, your own neighborhood, and go, all the things that we challenge, we're struggled and we're going through challenges as a society. Like, there's a lot to be despaired by. There's a lot to lose hope over. And Christians have wrestled with this since the very beginning. What I want to leave you with today is one encouragement for one of Jesus' first followers. In writing a letter, one of his last letters to Christians who were looking at the world around them, and there was a whole lot to despair about, and he again reassured them that there was not only a promise of Jesus' return, there's a lot in the world that you could be worried about and things not going according to plan. He gives them an incredible reminder of a promise that Jesus gave this, and it's from the Apostle Peter. And just before his death, he writes this letter to Jesus' followers, which I think still holds weight for us today. He says this. It says, the day of the Lord will come like a thief. And he references what Jesus talked about earlier about the whole thief breaking in, Home Alone. You remember that? says the heavens will disappear with a roar and the elements will be destroyed by fire and the earth and everything done in it will be laid bare. Isn't that an encouraging picture about the future, right? Super Jono, it's exactly what I wanted to start my New Year's with. Where's the whole New Year's resolution preach? And you were talking about everything, right? Peter he levels with everyone going, I know the outlook might be bleak, right? There's a lot going on that's out of our control that seems worrying and disconcerting. And in the next verse, he asks the question. He says, since everything will be destroyed in this way, here's the question. He says, what kind of people ought you to be? This is the question. When we think about in terms of the future and things we might be uncertain about and a whole lot to be worried about, how we answer this question that Peter poses, in many cases sets us up whether we will be overwhelmed by the future or whether we'll live future-proof. Peter brings it right down to not all the events happening out there and over there and when and there. He brings it right home. And the question is, in light of all the things we're unsure about, in light of all the potential despair there is, how should you live your life? What kind of person should you be? You can't control other people. You can't control all the affairs of the world. You certainly can't control God's mind, let alone politicians' mind, let alone people who own whatever. You can't control anyone. How should you live your life? And this has been the question that Jesus' followers have been brought to every single time and wrestling with the ideas about the future. How would you answer this question? Well, luckily for you, Peter answers it for us so we don't have to guess. He suggests that we ought to live holy and godly lives. Say this term with me. As we what? As we look forward to the day of God and speed its coming. To look forward. Peter says we're to live holy lives. That means to be set apart, totally devoted to Jesus, and godly. Lives that represent Jesus' life, that imitate the example of Jesus. And on top of that, he said that you would live lives that would look forward. When you think about the world, don't despair, don't be worried. Look forward. To have a hopeful expectation in your lives. What I'd love us to do as we finish today, I'm going to invite us in a second to stand with our creative team and sing one of the songs we sung earlier about the faithfulness and the goodness of God, because that's the whole reason we can have a hopeful anticipation and expectation about the future, to look forward, because we can't always depend on circumstances and environments. We can't control the future, but we can follow a God who you can depend on, who you can trust in, who you can put your hope in. So this morning, maybe you're worried about the future. Maybe the uncertainty sometimes can cloud your mind or cloud your emotions and affect how you live. But as Peter asks, what kind of person ought we to be? We ought to be people who know our God as the one who's faithful, that you can depend on, that you can trust in, and ultimately has given us a promise that one day he will make everything right. And one day he will wipe away every tear from our eyes. And one day every bit of injustice that calls out aloud, he will make right. He will make all things new. So would you stand with me together this morning? And as we wrestle with things maybe we're unsure about, this is a great time to look up, lift our attention to heaven.
All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. It's your goodness. It's your goodness is running after me. 'Cause your goodness is running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running after me. 'Cause your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
Heavenly Father, in light of all the things that we really don't have much clue about, and we kind of feel like we can be spectators watching events unfold in front of us, today we hold on to our hope that you're a God who is faithful through all seasons of life, the ups and the downs. And this morning, for maybe the hearts that have been burdened and worried about the future and the uncertainty of it, may their hearts again be reminded of your faithfulness, of your care for them, of your incredible commitment to their life. That they are of so much value to you, that not only did you give your life for them, you've promised to come again and to make all things right. So may us as a church carry that hope with us every day. May we live it, may we breathe it, may we speak it. And for the hearts here this morning that have never known Jesus and the hope that he brings, may their hearts be open today to the promise of heaven, the promise of an eternal hope. Maybe that's you this morning, and if you're honest, you're like, yeah, I've never believed in Jesus and I've never trusted him with my life. I want to pray a prayer this morning. I want to invite everyone to pray this prayer with me out loud. It's just a simple prayer, but it's a prayer of trusting your life to Jesus. And if you've never done that before, maybe you've heard about Jesus and you've been around church, but if you're honest, you've never given your life to him, trusted him with your future, and determined to follow him. I want you to pray this prayer with all your heart this morning. It's a simple prayer of commitment to Jesus. So if we could all pray this together as a community out loud. I'll say a line, and you can repeat it after me. Say with me. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your faithfulness shown through Jesus. And right now, in the midst of my life and an uncertain future, I commit my life to your promise, to your leadership. I'm going to follow you. Amen. If you pray that prayer, maybe for the first time or maybe a recommitment, that's an awesome way to start your new year. It's an awesome way to live your life. And at the church, we exist to help you along that journey. So any way we can help you take your next step, please make yourself known to our team, to myself. You can scan the QR code in front of you if you don't want to talk to anyone in person just yet, or you DM us online, or you can swing by our Connect Lounge. We'd love to help you take your next step. I want to invite you back to next week. One of my pastors, one of the biggest influences of my life, Josh Kelsey, will be sharing part 2 of our series. He pastors a church in New York City, in Paris, France, and in Berlin, Germany. And he's an Aussie, but he's back holidaying on the coast. Of course you would. And he's going to be sharing here on Sunday. You won't want to miss a great service. Invite someone to. Have the most wonderful day. God bless you. Enjoy time this week. Thanks.
It's not over till it's over. I got resurrection power. When the odds are stacked against me, I'm still living in the victory. Not living in the spirit in these dry bones. There's some Holy Ghost in my soul. Every scar has told me something. Gotta get up when I'm losing. Not stuck here in the pain of my past mistakes. 'Cause you break me out of my cage. I am coming out fighting. I am like Mercury rising. I got supernatural power inside me, so don't you count me out. I'm coming out fighting. I'm coming out fighting. I've been broken, yeah, I've been beaten, but there's some fight in me left. I will rise again, find my feet again. You're not done with me yet. I am coming out fighting. I am like Mercury rising. I am coming out fighting. I am like Mercury rising. I got supernatural power inside of me, so don't you count me out. I'm coming out fighting. I'm coming out fighting. I'm coming out fighting.
Are you past the point of weary? Is your burden weighing heavy? Is it all too much to carry? Let me tell you about my Jesus. Do you feel that empty feeling? 'Cause shame's done all it's stealing, and you're desperate for some healing. Let me tell you about my Jesus. He makes a way